Good morning, everybody. My name is Randon Taylor. I am a postdoc at the University of Amsterdam, researching AI democratization. This is part of the University of Amsterdam's series on humane AI. With humane AI, what we are looking to do is to enable artificial intelligence to be more human-centric, broadly thinking about how do we promote human well-being with artificial intelligence. Today we have a wonderful guest by the name of Dr. John W. Murphy. He is a professor of sociology at the University of Miami. Dr. Murphy received his Ph.D. degree from Ohio State University. His area of focus is broadly social philosophy. He has been writing on technology and including AI for many years. And he is currently completing a book which he calls Technology, AI, the Life World, People Matter. He is also the co-director of Flourishing AI, which is a nonprofit that looks to humanize artificial intelligence within the workplace. And he's a long-term mentor of mine, amongst many others. Today, Dr. Murphy will be talking about the philosophy underpinning AI and how and why philosophy matters. So, Dr. Murphy, whenever you're ready.
Okay, so although algorithms are, I'm just going to just a brief little statement. Then what I'm going to do is read for about 12 minutes. I practiced, so it's going to be about 12 minutes, and then we can have a lot of discussion. So although algorithms are the focus of attention today, philosophy is key to this talk. Okay, what I'm calling for actually is the need for a new philosophy that can reveals what we need is a new philosophy that sort of reveals why technology has gained the autonomy that it has, and basically the aim is to sort of resurrect the life world as a base in terms of thinking about technology and AI. Okay, so that's in a sense the idea here. By resurrecting the life world is to try to produce a more humane AI. Okay, I mean this is what we're going to try to do today. Okay, so the title of this talk really is "There's Nothing Artificial About AI." Okay, so I'm going to try to explain what all that means. Okay, so like I said, this paper should last about 12 minutes, so you shouldn't get too sleepy.
That's excellent. That's excellent. And after that, I'll have some discussion questions for you. And then we'll have discussion questions from the audience.
Sure. Perfect. Okay. The introduction. Since the invention of computers, their introduction into workplaces and other organizations has been controversial. At first, they were recognized to alter the pace of work, while later the emphasis shifted to their negative impact on worker motivation. Then the focus changed to the generation of alienation and control of the workplace, along with the fragmentation of work and the reinforcement of bureaucracy. All the time, however, a general theme pervaded modern societies that these devices would increase efficiency and productivity. The same dynamic appears to be operative with AI. On the one hand, research and other reports abound that illustrate the abuses of AI and how this technology has made working life of persons miserable. When workers, for example, face the utilization of AI, their immediate reaction is fear of lost jobs, overwork, and manipulation. On the other side, like the earlier phase of computers, AI is touted to improve work and the tasks associated with most other applications. The efficiency of workplace will improve, waste will be a thing of the past. That's basically how it's summarized. Accordingly, productivity gains will be experienced wherever AI is properly implemented. To avoid the downside of this technology, critics are calling for the creation of a human-centric AI. At other times, the phrase responsible AI is inserted into discussions of the misery caused by this technology. In this debate over how to humanize AI, a key issue has been overlooked that contributes to the perceived threat posed by this equipment. This omission relates to the lack of scrutiny to the alleged artificial nature of technology. Specifically, because AI is presumed to be artificial and thus de-linked from human frailties and limitations, almost unlimited possibilities are associated with this technology. The aim of this discussion is to address the question, what makes AI artificial? This issue needs to be explored to understand how this technology has gained this unique status and how any successful correctives to the problem posed by AI must proceed. This section is called Inventing the Artificial. In the context of AI, because humans are limited and unpredictable, the human condition, to borrow from Hobbes, is nasty and restricted. In other words, the physical and mental abilities of persons have natural boundaries that halt progress. But the many advocates of AI believe that this technology can remedy the situation and expand human capabilities. Through the use of software and hardware, but most notably nowadays algorithms, the aim has been to simulate human thinking and behavior. Characteristics related to intelligence, rationality, reliability, and judgment, not to mention a host of other things, are thus enhanced. In this regard, AI follows a trend in traditional Western philosophy that has been adopted in the search for certainty. The accepted practice has been to isolate an element that is treated as foundational and therefore provides an appropriate reference for identifying real, reliable knowledge. The logic that is introduced by the algorithm assumes an almost idealized form, similar to the ideas of Plato and the basic principles sought by many other philosophers. Framed in this manner, algorithms are part of what Heidegger calls the onto-theological tradition. These devices, therefore, can be thought of as ultimately valid and reliable, in that they are divorced categorically from the contingency that plagues the human condition. But problems arise from this dualism that removes logic from everyday life. For example, thinking becomes abstract, rigid, and unrelenting. Given their status within this philosophical framework, algorithms can begin to define thinking, channel input, and select appropriate responses, especially when learning is attributed to this technology. On close examination, however, is artificial intelligence really artificial? There is no doubt because of dualism, algorithms have been able to create this illusion. Equally clear is that thought and action have become abstract. But artificial is an altogether different question. Okay. This section is called Exposing the Artificial. By removing thinking and action from everyday life through sophisticated models, an artificial situation is created. Although such a maneuver may be difficult to envision, the mainstream of Western intellectual tradition adheres to this principle. In fact, truth and sound ethical standards require the abstract foundation that is possible. That AI has been affected by this tradition is not odd. But the question remains, are algorithms artificial? In her book, The Atlas of AI, Kate Crawford answers this question in the negative. By reviewing the history of computers, she illustrates that AI is enmeshed in the natural world and has serious ecological implications. Her contribution, she believes, is to move outside of the nowhere spaces where most of the discussions of AI take place, to make this technology artificial. Nowhere spaces is a term she uses to suggest that basically the discussions of AI have been almost apolitical, asocial, almost taking place in a vacuum. Okay. The method used in this discussion is quite different from Crawford's, that show that AI is not artificial. The point here is to return AI to the lived and not simply the natural world. Okay. Many contemporary philosophers reject dualism and the associated artificial rendition of thinking and action. They argue, following the lead of Edmund Husserl, that all knowledge is linked intimately to a knower. Sort of the famous phrase he uses to describe this, he says, consciousness is always conscious of something. I mean, that sounds incredibly esoteric, but with that simple phrase, he's really trying to break with this dualist tradition, okay? As phenomenologists like to say, all knowledge is embedded in the Lebenswelt, or life world. Algorithms are no exception, despite their ethereal appearance. Like all other depictions of knowledge, these models represent stories about how thinking and action should proceed. And similar to any other narratives, the stories provided by algorithms are restricted. and have limited validity. Given the influence of the life world, every representation of knowledge provides simply an orientation, okay? Some writers have an interesting way of making this point by claiming that all knowledge is biographical. The result is that algorithms should never be viewed as artificial, but stories, simply stories that require a proper reading, okay? In other words, what world or life world is the algorithm trying to portray? Although, typically algorithms are not thought of as embedded or even representing a life world. Operating from the life world, however, or the non-dualistic frame of interpretation and creativity, nothing can gain the abstract stature required to be artificial. Accordingly, every form of knowledge is a mode of expression, and algorithms are no different. When algorithms are treated as artificial, however, they represent an especially stunted expression. That is, they are limited in their responses to situations, especially those that are novel, and their logic is not readily susceptible to immediate modification. In the life world, however, nothing is artificial, even if a sophisticated facade of artificiality is deployed. Their origin is the pool of information that is ubiquitous to the life world, along with the thinking and actions that are regularly contested in everyday interaction. At their root, algorithms are simply interpretive schemes provided by what Alfred Schutz calls, and they provide what Alfred Schutz calls recipes for making sense of daily life. This section, it's getting close to the end, a reassessment of algorithms. The standard critique is that algorithms are out of control, mostly because their operation is concealed from most persons. The work at a warehouse, for example, is guided by a logic that is known exclusively to AI experts and is unexamined by most workers. Indeed, the same can be said about office staff. For this reason, remedies for increased transparency and more reasonable perspective. For this reason, remedies call for increased transparency and a more reasonable perspective on algorithms. But the larger question is, how can the artificial be made human? Because everyone's talking about a human-centric AI. After all, technology's power is derived from denying any human connection. Standardization and formalization labor to obscure contingency and therefore marginalize the human element of any task. Without dualism, the strength of algorithms would be lost in technology in general. Traditionally conceived, the artificial is anathema to daily human affairs. What this tack toward anti-dualism reveals, however, is that the artificial has always been an illusion. This maneuver demonstrates that the autonomy of algorithms is a chimera. The key insight is that algorithms have never been artificial. They have always been grounded in human experience of the life world. In other words, algorithms have never been autonomous. But then the question still has to be addressed is how has this illusion come about? Okay. Algorithms are a human projection and nothing more. And thus they do not need to be retrieved. That's another thing people are saying now. We need to retrieve these things. Okay. The only reason that they appear to be artificial and thus autonomous is due to self-denial, however. As Heidegger might say, persons have forgotten that their presence is at the core of technology. Okay. That the human presence is at the core of technology. Given this non-dualistic philosophy, making these devices tools in the service of human goals is not an appropriate remedy for the autonomy of technology. I mean, you hear this all the time. We wish we could just bring these back so they were tools that humans could use. What I'm arguing here is that that's a wrong way to think about it. Okay? The simple reason is algorithms are expressions and not tools. Transforming them into tools only supports and plays into their autonomy. When grounded in the life world, this technology no longer has the latitude to define the parameters of thought and action. In terms of philosophy, there's no reason why algorithms should have a grip on persons. In fact, anti-dualism eliminates the rationality for such domination. But there's no doubt that other factors come into play, such as economic and political power, that encourage the current asymmetry between humans and algorithms. And in the hands of those who want to increase their control of situations, such as workplaces, algorithms can be a valuable but distorted expression in this activity. This is the conclusion. Although philosophy is key to rethinking the status of algorithms, the discussion nowadays of this technology is too apolitical. For example, seldom is the term capitalism ever mentioned. Even Zuboff's recent attempt to correct the situation and politicize AI is mild. Any serious use of philosophy to expose the human core of algorithms will run into difficulties due to the vested interest of those who control how this technology will likely be employed. Within this dynamic, philosophy can only go so far. Any successful intervention will require that a connection be made between philosophy and practical action. Nonetheless, in the light of contemporary philosophy, there is nothing artificial about AI. Therefore, there is no need to retrieve this technology. But in the ambiance of capitalism, more than philosophy will be needed for the human core of AI to be recognized and brought to the forefront of politics and practices. Okay, so before we discuss it, just one thing I would like to add is that when I'm talking about politics here at the end, I'm not looking outside of the life world for some type of intervention as a corrective. And we can talk about that too. I was thinking about that the other night when I was working on this in this book I'm thinking about. Is that we need to, I got this idea a little bit from Herbert Marcuse, because you can tell, anybody that's listening can tell that my work has been heavily influenced by Martin Heidegger. And of course, Heidegger had various students, and Herbert Marcuse was one of them. And so he struggled, Marcuse, well, he struggled against Heidegger's sort of anti-Semitism also, but he was struggling with this idea of what would a politics within the life world look like. So there's not only a politics of the life world, but there's a politics in the life world also. Okay, so that's it. I'm ready for whatever you guys want to talk about.
That was absolutely excellent. And I appreciate you mentioning how the life world itself isn't the politics within, it's not the intervention itself. I don't even think it would be the actual praxis, would it? I mean, there would be something else, Is that true?
Well, yes. I mean, the first step would be to recognize sort of the life world as the basis of action and knowledge. And then that would require a rethinking of politics, because there would be, like I was saying, there's politics of the life world, that all politics and all knowledge originates from the life world. But then what do politics look like from within the life world? I mean, there's still going to be action, there's being various things. What I wanted to avoid, I didn't want to create the image here that somehow when it came down to it, I'm calling for some type of intervention from outside of the life world that has to come in to rescue us from our own creations.
Right.
I mean, that's sort of the problem. I mean, in a sense, we've created these things and now they appear to be our adversaries. And how did they gain that autonomy?
Right.
That's the issue. And there's no doubt there's politics involved in this, and illusions and all kinds of different things that have brought this about.
Of course. And let me, I should have did this at first, but sometimes my mind moves faster than my hands, but in my mouth. So I wanted to also thank the audience for being here today. I know that you all don't have to be here, but thank you so much. And I do have about 5 or 6 discussion questions coming from me, but then we'll fill questions from the audience also. So if you all want, in fact, and you can also go ahead, if you're in the audience, submit your discussion questions in the chat. But let me ask you this questions real quick. Let me ask you, Dr. Murphy, how might recognizing AI's human core influence how we design and implement this technology, especially in addressing issues related to the treatment of workers?
Yeah. So Randon put a link. He's going to put a link in there that you can consult, because I'm going to make reference now to a project that I've been involved in for a few years now, and it's called Flourishing AI. Okay, and I'm working on this with another. Well, Randon was a student of mine, and so there's another student that I'm working with, a former student in Colombia, in Latin America. And this Flourishing AI project is the whole idea is to try to create a human-centric AI, although there's questions I'm raising in this book about the centricity of things. That's another issue we have to look at. But the idea is that in terms of flourishing AI, is how do we build AI from the ground up rather than building it from the top down? I mean, so in a sense, overwhelmingly, AI is or has been developed from the top down. Okay, and so recognizing that there's this human presence at the core of these things undermines that strategy of building things from the top down, as if there's only a few people that have the ability to do this or have the right to do it. And so this whole project of flourishing AI is aimed, the aim of it is to build, for example, when any company is thinking about introducing AI, what we do and planning to do more of is to start a whole range of discussions about how this should, in a company, how this should be built from the base up. I mean, all of you have probably read about the way things work at Amazon. I mean, I don't need to tell everybody about that. I mean, how you have, once you click a button and you want to buy something and you want it there in a day, that starts something in Amazon where the algorithms are dictating the pace of work, how fast people have to do things, and so forth. And those workers, of course, had no input into that at all in terms of what they think fatigue is, how work should proceed, and so forth. So I think this opens the door for building this from the base up.
Yeah, and this ties into my next question is, with using algorithms and AI within organizations, where does the concept of Marxist alienation fit into all this? Does it exacerbate alienation? Possibly, how could we reduce alienation with AI?
Yeah. So if alienation, I mean, there's different ways you can think of it. I mean, alienation can mean simply, as you know, there was a social psychologist named Seaman that talked about this, and people's feelings of powerlessness and meaninglessness and so forth. That's one way to look at it. But the way I'm talking about it today is that I remember I just sort of said in passing that these technologies have seemed to have taken on a life of their own. And although they're human creations, people seem to be alienated from their own products, namely sort of like AI. Okay. And so this illusion has been created. And now, of course, there's all this talk about AI being a black box, which has even sort of reinforced this, that now people are saying that even the creators of people that even created AI can't understand what's going on inside of them. I mean, this reaches a state of absurdity, where, looking inside algorithms may be complex and it may be difficult to unravel, but to say that you don't have access to any of that is almost the epitome of alienation, in the sense that your own products come back to haunt you. Okay, so in a sense, if you're building whatever you're building, whether it's AI or just about any facet of a workplace, if you're building this from the base up, the whole point is for those people who are involved in that process to feel that what they've created is their a product of their actions, and undermining the potential autonomy, okay, where these things can come back to haunt people.
And really, thank you for your answer. That was excellent. Really what you're doing is you're demystifying the hype around the AI having some kind of emergent intelligence. You're demystifying, you're grounding AI back into the human experience, and that all ties into how a certain philosophy, dualism or whatever else, espouses this image of AI being autonomous and emergent of some kind of consciousness or something like that. But let me ask you, what is what are the material benefits of these organizations in promoting this AI hype that it's emergent and autonomous? How do they benefit in promoting these certain messages?
Well, I guess there's all depends where you're coming from on this. So I guess there's an upside to treating AI or in other technologies as treating them as if they're autonomous or artificial, because that would allow you to implement them without a whole lot of human input, because the human input is seen as a contaminant. I mean, in a sense, the idea is that you've almost mastered real rationality, and to have all this human input and dialogue and discussion and so forth is thought to water that down. So I guess if you're into sort of streamlining and refining, what's happening, well, this is a good thing, But if you're thinking about alienation and what goes on in a workplace and what constitutes a humane workplace and so forth, this is a terrible thing, because it's creating the illusion that only a few people, and it's usually thought to be sort of a managerial elite maybe, and some tech people who are given access to these, to these devices and have some idea what's going on. And just to give you one thing, we're working on this. One part of this flourishing AI thing that we're dealing with is we're trying to start a project where we're bringing together, and I don't know how this is going to work, but I mean, how it's going to work out. But the beginning of the project is to bring together tech people and sort of philosophers, and to really begin to have an exchange here. So these tech people will begin to recognize that there has been a philosophy at the base of what they've been doing. And of course, we're going to argue it's been the wrong philosophy. That if you really want to have these models act like humans, or talk like humans, or maybe even moralize like humans, why are you adopting a philosophy that takes all of those aspects outside of the human realm? It's sort of no. I mean, it really, it isn't a big question of why these things aren't working, because in a sense, if you want to have a language model that's supposed to somehow, I mean, these guys would say we're not trying to make these things speak like humans, but if you really want these things to even come close to be able to do what humans do, why do you constantly avoid looking at how humans actually talk, and how they actually interact? You see what I'm saying? Yeah.
Definitely. And last question for myself, then I'll move on to the audience questions. And particularly in the United States, in a ultra capitalist environment, what are some practical actions that people can take to address the challenges posed by AI?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, this
outside of revolution.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Well, in a sense, even if we had some of what I'll say could even apply to a more collective orientation. I mean, we've had some movements toward more collective orientations that use technology in ways that weren't helpful either. So I guess the first thing, I mean, as you imagine, expect I'm going to say, is we really need sort of a real. We need to get back to what maybe Winograd was talking about, of a period of high theory, he called it, where we really begin to examine sort of the philosophy that's been operating at the basis of this technology. And there's a lot of people that over the years have been trying to do this, to really give technology a much more of a human grounding, okay? And then that's like the first step, and then you got to figure out, what type of practical maneuvers, I guess, you're going to make. Some people would say unionization could do it, but unions oftentimes focus simply on practical things like getting people better benefits and wages. Nothing wrong with that, of course, but you probably need a lot more thought about how, and this is beginning to happen, like in the United States with the writers and so forth, of how are people that are going to be affected by this participate in the construction of the AI that's actually going to, they're actually going to be expected to use or adopt. So I guess, I guess what I'm saying is you really have to look for your own sort of inroads, I mean, there's going to be different ways to try to resist this in certain ways and at different, different avenues. But again, I think it goes back to philosophy. As one writer said, you don't have good practice until you have good thinking. You have good philosophy. Well, that was actually Lenin. So I don't know if you want to. Okay, have good practice. They have good philosophy.
Okay, and really what you're talking about, even with flourishing AI, is narrowing the gap between the values of the elite, the ones who run the organizations, and the workers, so that those values can align, and AI can be more so-called human-centric. It can promote human well-being. Now,
wait. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I was going to say, this is you mentioned the term. This is in the literature. They call this the alignment problem. But the issue is you're raising another issue of the politics of this, which Christian doesn't really talk about. When we're talking about this sort of alignment problem, but that's another.
Yeah, and that is I guess that would be the most challenging thing is you have particularly in America, the United States, capitalists who are just focused on increasing profit margins, and then to ask them to try to align their values with the workers, that's going to be challenging, very challenging.
Well, I know. I mean, just in my class yesterday, right now I'm teaching a course in organization, and so I was trying to show the students, what is the likely way that this technology is going to be used, And so I tell them, some movements have been going on in the United States, and anti-union movements and all these different things. And then, but I don't want to leave it at that. I say, what would a supportive technology look like? And what would a supportive organization look like? That would allow, because I mean, you got to understand, like in my own history personally, I mean, I've been pushing back on technology forever, but then finally with this book that I'm working, that you mentioned, I finally realized I have to do something different. I mean, I have to begin to write in a way that maybe we could begin to humanize this stuff. It's not going to disappear. The way I used to put it, people aren't willing to give up their refrigerators. It's not going to happen, and they're probably not going to give up their phones either. But so, we're all, even in organizations, we're trying to figure out what would a supportive technology look like, and what would a supportive organization look like, and there's various dimensions, but you're right. When like in terms of organizations, when owners of companies have been confronted with this idea that I could tell you how to humanize your organization, and by doing this, productivity is probably going to go up, because there's literature that says this is what's going to happen. If you humanize, do various things that sort of humanize workers' lives in the organization, they have better attitudes toward work. They work, they have higher levels of productivity and so forth. But just about whenever this happens, for the most part, it's rejected by managers and owners. So why is that? Well, I have some ideas, because that just when people get this type of insight and they get this type of involvement, they become empowered. Now, is this humanization all about real humanization, or is it, when it comes down to it, is it going to come down to control? And if it's going to come down to control, that's another issue, isn't it?
Right, exactly. And that ties into a lot of social psychology, dealing with social dominance and system justification. But this also segues into one of my colleagues' question to you, Dr. Matthias Philippe. He says, Dr. Murphy, great talk. Thank you. When discussing the need for a bottom-up approach to AI development, the challenge of accommodating diverse cultures and individual differences arises, of course. The question then becomes, how can we go about creating a more plural verse of AI that addresses these complexities? Is it even possible? We do live in, particularly in the United States and in the UK and even the Netherlands. I mean, these are definitely multicultural societies. So how can we develop an AI that reflects those different narratives?
Yeah. but of course, my immediate is, of course, I think it's possible, but again, I'm going to refer to some philosophers, early on, when I was a student and an undergraduate, I came across, in a course, professor introduced us to the thought of Martin Buber, and Martin Buber was, of course, well known for his call for dialogue, between people. There's what he calls I-thou relationship. So this started me down a trek, and now there's many more people than Martin Buber talking about this. I mean, my opinion is, at the heart of social philosophy now, this is where all the action is in terms of how to establish diverse organizations that still have organization, that are still organized. This is the real issue, because everyone's talking about diversity, but then few people are saying, okay, what type of arrangements, what type of dialogue, what type of situation has to be created so that this diversity is allowed to flourish, but at the same time, people are willing to organize out of this, to come to some organization. I mean, this is really, and of course, this is called the democratization of workplaces and so forth. And so I guess I'm saying that I still believe, I really think that people like Buber and Levinas and some others are really trying to work on this issue. Just another, when I mention this, I'm thinking, a lot of this relates to sort of what's called self-management. And this came out of some of these philosophers in Yugoslavia post-World War II. And they had some of the best writers working on this issue of how to democratize workplaces. But of course, I don't know how that worked out, because Yugoslavia broke down into ethnic hostilities and so forth. But anyway, that's sort of my answer. I think we need to really take seriously and work on this issue of dialogue and what that involves.
Excellent. Now, I think it also depends on how groups think about who is in their in-group. Do you view everybody in the organization as a part of a community, or, like you said, does it get back to an issue of control and dominance?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, how do we begin to look at organizations as truly learning communities? I mean, that's sort of the key,
Right.
And there's a long history in organizations, like theories of organizations, that don't address that issue at all. And this is, well, I mean, maybe peripherally and so forth, but that's this is a guy named Peter Senge who's trying to do this. I'm not sure he has the right philosophy to do it, but this is new language in the sense, looking at organizations not as structures, and not in some type of different components, but beginning to look at organizations as learning communities. And what the heck is a community? That's sort of the key.
And when you're, the more you talk about this, the more my sociological brain goes back to, okay, remember, AI is a tool that attains a goal. And what we're really seeking to do is get human beings to stop dehumanizing other human beings, because the dehumanization is, manifested in how they, build code or write code or their algorithms. So let me move to the next question by our other colleague, Marco Lueres. Marco asks, how does embodiment, the concept of embodiment and the concept of the body, matter to AI? What is its relevance?
Yes. So, Marco, the idea here is, you probably, when you're thinking about Dreyfus, and I think this is coming from, because Dreyfus says that the reason why computers are always going to be alienating is because they don't have bodies. It's a famous phrase that he says. And what he's calling for, honestly, when he's saying that, is bringing computers and technology recognize their origin in the life world. Okay, so if they're in the life world, then they are they the stage is set for them to be viewed as embodied. Okay, so in a sense, he's talking about Dreyfus is talking about the body physically being embodied, but embodiment. And this is going to be an issue, I think, because in this book I'm talking about, I'm arguing that just about every discussion that these AI proponents are addressing, whether it's morality, whether it's language and so forth, all these approaches are all disembodied. So what the heck does embodiment mean? Okay, what it means here is that you recognize that, for example, AI is simply a human expression. And there's no way that this human expression can be divorced except from the action that's embodied in those expressions, but by the illusion of dualism. Okay, so in a sense, when Dreyfus is calling for the embodiment of these things, he uses this talk about the body because phenomenologists tend to do this, and he's a phenomenologist. And this goes back to Merleau-Ponty and some others, that he's borrowing from. But again, don't get stuck too much on simply the physical body, which mediates everything that's known. Okay, but don't get too fixated on that. But think about how the human action is fundamentally connected with, but not only connected, but totally immersed in what is ever is known. Okay, so this is what we're talking about with a type of embodiment. So Marco, does that get at what you're thinking?
Or you can respond.
Yeah, I don't know.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that definitely answers my question. I think it's something that has really stuck in my head in trying to understand artificial intelligence and it being an expression of human knowledge. I think that human beings have a very unique experience, not to get too like esoteric, but we have a unique experience and we have ways of sensing our social worlds, and we have ways of interpreting our social worlds that are in a way non-definable. There's a limitless amount of ways in which each individual person can interpret their social realities, and these things can change in group settings by context, right? So I think the thing about artificial intelligence that's so interesting to me is that artificial intelligence takes snapshots of datas and data points and sort of amalgamates them into this sort of end product, which in a way, I saw that someone mentioned AI being a form of magic. It's sort of an alchemy, right? It's mixing together a lot of things and it's spitting out a certain thing. So it's really interesting. But philosophy obviously informs artificial intelligence in many different ways. And Dr. Murphy, if I can just answer or ask you one more question.
Uh-huh.
So Geoffrey Hinton, who is the godfather of AI, I don't know if you saw, but a couple of weeks ago on 60 Minutes, he sort of discussed AI as being almost sentient in a way, in that it's understanding itself and that it's recoding itself. What are your thoughts on that? And where do you think generative AI is going from here?
Well, I think if you grant autonomy to this equipment and this device, I guess it could go anywhere. But the key is, why do you want to do that? That's the whole thing. Because there's this, again, it goes back to sort of this dualist idea of separating, creating this illusion that your products are separate from what you wanted them to do. Why would you think that they could do anything you don't want them to do? Now the question then becomes, well, and this is something we just skirted around a little bit, why do people want to destroy themselves? You know, why do people want to engage in these things? That's a whole nother issue, you know. So when people start talking like that, I don't pay any attention. I mean, I just figure they're alienated as heck, you know, that this thing I just created, somehow I have to worry about it creating a future I don't want. Okay. Complete alienation. What am I supposed to do? You know? So that probably doesn't answer your question. You probably expected something bigger.
Good question.
No, it definitely answers. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't give a whole lot of credence to all that. You know,
I love this because, you know, we keep on reiterating the fact that this is, and it should be based in the life world. It should be based in human experience. What we want it to do, it will do. If we don't want it to do something, we also have that agency to not make it do something, you know? So this is, it's very interesting. But let me go on to Rowan's question. Let me go on to Rowan's question. In her comment, she's the one who stated that, you know, she said, I'm currently playing with the idea of AI as being a form of magic, something we use with an aim to change things, take action, but without really understanding it. And yet we believe it works. What would be your view on that, Dr. Murphy?
Yeah, I think that's correct. I think I'm trying to think of this writer, Jean. Oh, if you're interested, okay. Because I think that's a good way to characterize what exactly is happening. So what you should look at, just for a start, there's a writer named Jean Gebser, Jeangebser, Jean Gebser. And he has a book, it's called, Ursprung und Gegenwart. Now, this has been translated into Origin and Presence, okay? And when I was a master's degree student, I was lucky enough to work with a guy who was translating his book. But I was only there for 2 years working on a master's degree. So I had a small role as a graduate student. You know, tell me, go look this up, go look that up. You know, like graduate students do, I guess. But Gebser has this typology where he talks about 4 types of knowledge, and how we go through various phases, and one is the magical phase. So you may, if you look at Gebser, if you read about what he's talking about magic, I think this will give you some insight or give you some help to really sort of describe what's involved with magic, and maybe a writer that could be helpful, you know. Yeah, I don't know if the person said introduce the topic.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful. I'm curious.
Yeah, I don't know if you got the name, Jean Gebser.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I did.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And Rowan, do you have any more questions? Do you want him to elaborate a little bit, or how do you feel?
No, I think it's just an idea that I'm playing with in my head. And it's interesting for me being an anthropologist, because anthropologists have liked the topic of magic very long, but the topic of AI is rather new. So it's an interesting exploration. And Jean Gebser, I'll look him up.
Yeah, check him out.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, he was very, again, I was, you know, close to this because I worked with this guy that was doing the translation. But, you know, there's a whole society called, I don't know if it's still functioning, called the Jean Gebser Society, where these people get together and read papers and so forth. So if you get online, you could probably find a lot about Gebser. And the professor I was working with, his name was Algis Makunis. He's a Lithuanian guy, and he was, yeah, I mean, and so it was very helpful. I mean, very insightful, Gebser.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Check him out.
Okay, let me go ahead and move towards these last 2 questions from the audience, and then we'll kind of close out on those notes. This is from our colleague Sajad. He says, I'm wondering what you think about the idea of human control. The idea of meaningful human control has been used widely, but some others have criticized it on different grounds, including the fact that it sometimes relies on an idealistic picture of the human as fully rational, autonomous, as an autonomous being also. What's your view on that and on meaningful human control?
Yeah. So I'm thinking Gabriel Marcel, I'm probably a little obscure in a way, but Marcel was a French existentialist early on. It wasn't one of these newer ones, maybe in the 30s and the 40s, maybe in the 30s, you probably, although his work's still around, Gabriel Marcel. He makes this distinction. He says, between being and having. And what he's trying to say here is that we never, if you want to have things, and now we may say control those things, that's sort of a very sort of alienated way to think about it. And he would say, rather than people never really should want to control things. In a sense, they should want to sort of actualize what they're doing. See, for Marcel, control sort of means that you're above, you're pulling strings, you're not really connected, you're not really attached, and then that can lead to incredible alienation. So I guess what I'm saying to you is for an answer is that think about what it would mean to be able to and I'm saying this, I'm thinking Eric Fromm thinks about this in a very similar way. What does it mean to bring something to fruition, but not necessarily have it understood that I'm controlling what's happening? In a sense, control seems to imply some type of distance, some type of disembodiment. Again, some type of alienation from something you've actually created. So in a sense, how do you begin to think about taking your creations to fruition, which would also imply they don't turn on you, they don't necessarily do what you don't want them to do, but they don't have a life of their own either that you're trying to constrain. Do you see what I'm saying? This is so when you ask the question, it immediately comes to mind, well, the book by Marcel, Being and Having, but also Eric Fromm talks, and Eric Fromm, was a member of these Frankfurt writers. F-R-O, if you're not familiar with them, F-R-O-M-M, Eric Fromm. I don't know if that's helpful.
Yeah, I'm trying to send this link to Marcel's book.
Yeah,
but
I mean it's an old book, but people don't really. I mean, I was never a big fan of his. It's not that I'm an advocate, but when you say that, immediately that came to mind. This difference between being and having.
That book is you can just Google it, Being and Having by Marcel. It's definitely on Google.
Yeah.
And great answer and great question also. We appreciate that. Now, Arjan, I may pronounce your name wrong, but Arjan has a question also. What would be a great introduction book or PDF or something like that on philosophy and AI? So particularly for computer science students, thinking about, an accessible explanation of what dualism is, why it matters, and its relevance to the life world. Just to let you know, Arjan, the link that I sent earlier with the flourishing AI and the paper that we wrote, in the beginning, in the middle of the article, Dr. Murphy explains this in more detail, why philosophy matters and things like that. But Dr. Murphy, if you have any more recommendations on a good text that'll introduce non-philosophers to these topics, please share that.
Yes, I think. I mean, Marco may think this is difficult, but maybe he wouldn't think this is a good choice. But I think Dreyfus and What Computers Can't Do, I think, is a great introduction. He assumes certain things, but it's not unreachable. Especially now, if you can, because people have iPads and things like that. I think when you're reading, you can be looking up some things, and so you can sort of supplement that, But see, Dreyfus wrote this book, What Computers Can't Do. It really started out as a paper that when he was working at the Rand Corporation, And usually when he was at the Rand, people at the Rand Corporation, which is in Santa Monica, California, they the papers people would write when they were there would be immediately published by Rand. But this wasn't published for a couple of years. And then eventually he turned this into this book. So this is one of the first things I read as a student, which got me really excited about this whole idea of thinking about philosophy. Dreyfus died a few years ago, but he was a long time. Eventually, he had a hard time getting jobs too because of this critique. But then he eventually got a job at Berkeley and so forth. You know.
So bad, not so bad.
Yeah.
And what about the life world? A good life world.
Yeah, that's a little tougher because I'd say yes, that's tougher because I could a typical answer would be look up Edmund Husserl and with a book called The Crisis. It's the official title is something like Transcendental Phenomenology and the Crisis in European Science. But among phenomenologists, it's just called Crisis. And this is considered to be his last and probably most mature work where he elevates the life world in importance. But to a non-philosopher, this is not easy. And so, but there is nothing that's that easy. That's all. I could say, for example, Maurice Merleau-Ponty, the visible and the invisible. But that's not easy either. So let me think about this a little more. I'll try to think. Maybe I'll try to get something that's really accessible, and I'll send it to Randon, and he can forward it on.
Yeah, please do, please do.
Yeah. It's just the life world is a little more esoteric. It's buried within these guys' works. You know what I mean? And so it's tougher to give to isolate a real simple, straightforward discussion. The focus is what the aim is to try to explain what the life world is rather than simply jump into it and start using it, which these guys do. You know.
So do me a favor, Dr. Murphy, and summarize, and also, again, thank you all for your comments and questions. Excellent, excellent. We appreciate this great discussion. But do me a favor, Dr. Murphy, and summarize why philosophy is important in these discussions on AI. And we'll close out from there.
Yeah. The reason why I think that is because at the basis of this technology, there has been a philosophy operating that has not been dealt with. And I think that's a key reason why a lot of these applications and these, like, for example, going down the road of language, why these things just don't work, you know, because of that philosophy. Now, if you had a different philosophy, I suppose like phenomenology, maybe, and focus on the life world, then the big question is, this is more difficult to answer. Would that make this technology more amenable? You know, I don't know. You want to know the truth, because I still think there's something about the technology that's going to try to make language, for example, artificial. You know, there's something about the technology. But if there's constant human involvement, can that provide a corrective as this goes along? That's what I'm hoping will happen. You know, so I think philosophy can get you to that understanding.
This is, you know, as you're talking about this, I'm thinking about, you know, we always, especially, you know, grounded theorists and qualitative methodologists, we always, you know, talk about how the human experience is rich and the data that we get from interviews are very rich. And you know, thinking about if somebody could build something or code something that could encapsulate all that without distilling it into bits of information. I mean, because the amount of data that you're losing whenever you do that is significant. But you know, if somebody was able to do that, it would be a really big game changer. I mean, that's a monumental feat. It really is.
Well, you know, this was one of the things a while ago we faced when I was trying to assess what would happen with the introduction of computers into social service agencies. Because you think about these people taking counselor notes and all the stuff they're writing about their patients. And then suddenly the idea was these things can all be loaded onto a computer. How much was lost? Now people were saying, well, the technology is going to get bigger, it's going to get more powerful, and then more data can be uploaded, and a more holistic view can be, it won't be as fragmented as in the past. You know, I'm not sure, although you have holism there and maybe more data, but are you still not connecting with the life world? That's what I'm still concerned with, you know, because holism is not the same as community entry or sort of community solidarity. Those are different things, I think.
Right. When you say holism in this context, it's, I think the discussion surrounding, you know, more data doesn't equal more meaningful results, you know?
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. Well, this has been an excellent discussion. Every time I talk to Dr. Murphy about philosophy and AI, I mean, we just progress and move forward and build on these discussions. I thank you all for being in attendance with for this Humane AI discussion. Please look out for Dr. Murphy's book coming out, Technology, AI, and the Life World, People Matter. And then if you have any other questions, further questions for us, Dr. Murphy or myself, you can definitely email us.
Yes, do that.
Please do that. Please do that. I mean, he's very accessible. And
yeah, thanks for coming, everyone. You know, yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah.
Anything else from anybody? I think that's it.
Okay.
So that ends our humane discussion on philosophy and AI. Thank you so much, everybody.